and there's real questions about the sanctions that are put in place when it comes to Ukraine. If you were the Treasury Secretary, what do you think you would do at this point?
Well, let me just say, we've thought about these situations for a long time. This is not a scenario I ever contemplated we'd be in. I think the sanctions in general are very effective. In general, they're more effective ahead of time. So I would have been putting more sanctions on earlier on. I don't think sanctions alone are in any way an off-ramp, but there's no question at this point I would be putting on more sanctions. As an example, I think the administration's sanctions of SWIFT and others are a good start. There's a carve-out for oil and gas from Russia. I would immediately cease any payments in the energy markets. The fact that money is still going to Russia through that is something I would stop immediately, and I would sanction more people that are around Putin.
The costs of doing that, and the Biden administration has put that on the table, and there are others, obviously, that are pushing for that. To the United States and to Europe, do you think would be what?
Well, Andrew, look, I've always said sanctions are very powerful tools, and like other powerful tools, the U.S. has a responsibility to use them carefully. And there's no question that these are very effective because the U.S. is the reserve currency of the world and will be for the foreseeable future. I think we're not at a point where this is a cost-benefit analysis. This is a huge human tragedy. Civilians are being killed. And we can't worry about what the economic costs are on oil prices. We need to have maximum pressure to stop this horrific situation.
You mentioned SWIFT. There are some, including Jamie Dimon and others, who have commented that just shutting down SWIFT unto itself is not enough, that you effectively, if you want to provide, you want to have sanctions, you should have sanctions, but also raising questions about what taking down the SWIFT system for them does because of the reserve currency issue, what you think it may do with China and everything else.
Well, the way the sanctions work is there's primary sanctions and secondary sanctions. The primary sanctions are designed for individuals and for companies. So, for example, in 2008, we sanctioned Deripaska and Rusal. You also put on then secondary sanctions. What secondary sanctions say is that no banks can do business with primary sanctions or they get cut off from the dollar system, and that would include SWIFT. So the answer is, I think there needs to be many more primary sanctions, but the SWIFT sanctions are important as well.
Talking about primary sanctions, there's now an unclassified list that I think you were part of putting together in terms of oligarchs that could effectively be sanctioned, and now a task force that's in play to try to either reconstitute that list or sanction some of those people. How should we, if we were to look at that list, what do you think should happen?
So let me first say I completely support the administration's move to create a task force, but that's not good enough. In 2017, Congress passed the CATSA law, which required the Department of Treasury to create both a classified list and unclassified list of both oligarchs and people that were close to Putin. The unclassified list merely was a list that said these are all the people that have net worth above X or were close to Putin. It wasn't intended to separate the good people from the bad people. That's what was in the classified report. It was part of that when we designated Rusal and others. That report still exists. I'd encourage the Treasury Department to take out that report, update the classified material, send it to the president, and issue sanctions immediately for those people that are around Putin. Right. And then let the task force worry about going and confiscating assets.